how exactly does MCP work and what exactly is this?
There are a lot of companies who are making millions just by doing that.
Like one agent can talk to another agent using MCP.
There was no proper SDKs or frameworks to do these things.
So what are the alternatives to MCP?
So for example, DeepSeek, it's very popular reasoning model, DeepSeek R1.
You also might end up sharing your passwords and all those things in the prompt window, right?
MCP is built especially for
Hey guys, welcome to Better Engineering and Management Podcast. Today we have Rajat Gupta joining us to explain Model Context Protocol, commonly known as MCP, and how MCP will enable intra-agent communication. Rajat has around 10 years of experience in platform automation, scaling teams, as well as SRE. Rajat, please welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. Just to introduce myself, I am Rajat Gupta and I'm working in a software engineering field for almost a decade now. My focus has been building a scalable, reliable, and secure systems, which provides a great experience to our customers. Recent days, I am also doing a lot of work and exploration and research on how the new AI and how the LLMs can help you into improving your daily workflow and basically start doing the repetitive work that you do. Just give it to them. So doing a lot of research and experiments on that area as well. And other than that, I have my own blog post on Medium and as well as try to do podcasts, which is also very interesting and AI enabled. So feel free to check it out as well.
Sure, very interesting. So Rajat, tell us, what exactly is MCP? Please let our audience know how exactly does MCP work and what exactly is this?
That's a very good question, actually, what the MCP is. And MCP, if you find the literal terms, it's a model context protocol. And if we talk about traditionally, what used to happen if someone wants to connect to the AI to their data sources, they need to write custom integrations, custom scripts, or different tools. There was no proper, for example, SDKs or frameworks to do these things. And MCP was released by Anthropic. It's a kind of a standardization. So if you think you have two different LLMs and you are writing different applications for different LLMs or different AI providers, then you are going into like two and then you have like two more or three more integrations. So if you can say like if there are AI providers, then and applications, you are going to M into N sort of complexity. But with MCP, it's think about it as a REST framework or GraphQL, where it's a framework where you build your applications, and it's a framework how the LLMs will connect to your data sources, to your APIs, or to any external systems. So it's a framework which avoids that complexity of having M into N, but instead you can have M plus N. So for example, for M AI provider, you have N different integrations and then you are setting up in a common framework. You are not creating a different integration for different LLM providers. So you can say like how it's a framework on how the external data sources can talk to your AI or how AI can talk to them and give you a more granular and personalized answers based on that.
Interesting. So just to clarify, so this MCP protocol, is it for agents to talk to the outside world like databases and REST APIs, etc., or it will also enable the agents to do in communication amongst each other, like one agent can talk to another agent using MCP?
MCP is built especially for talking to your external data sources. So, for example,
Okay.
to your question, I would say MCP enables your AI to talk to your databases, to your, for example, Salesforce or any CRM tool, or you might be having any data sources, be it databases, be it APIs, or any. MCP will
Okay.
allow your AI or LLM to talk to your data sources, and
Okay.
it builds and knowledge base on that gathers the context. But MCPs are it is not built for inter-agent communication. MCP is not built for that. There are new things which are coming in the market, which is like Google's A2A framework, agent to agent, IBM's ACP, agent communication protocol, similar to MCP. They have released ACP as well. So this is where like they want to talk locally. Different AI agents are talking to each other, but MCP can help multiple agents sharing single MCP server. So, for example, I have two different AI agents, and they are talking to one MCP server. For example, one agent is only dedicated for writing the entries to database. Another agent is writing the fetching, reading the entries from the database. So those two agents can use same MCP, so it can empower multiple MCP in that manner. But if you want to talk or have more complex workflows, then MCP is not for that. There is a different protocols for that.
Understood. Okay, so what I understand is MCP may be used for inter-agent, but it's not designed for inter-agent communication. There are different protocols like A2A, which are kind of coming in the market for inter-agent communication. MCP is more for agents to connect to the rest of the world, like databases and REST APIs and all those kind of communications. But it will still help you a lot because for each agent, you need to invent a new language, a new way of communicating with the world. And all the agents, which are basically wrappers on top of LLMs, can actually use MCP language to communicate with the rest of the world. So once you have implemented MCP, all the agents can probably use the same language. Let's say, so how exactly does MCP work? For example, let's say if you want to connect to database, will you need to implement one MCP implementation for database, one implementation for REST API? Exactly. Can you explain how exactly does MCP work?
So, if we talk about MCP architecture,
Mhm.
before we talk about how MCP works, MCP architecture has like MCP host, which is your LLM and things, and then there is a MCP client from where you want to talk to them. How do you want to connect to your LLM? This can be like any UI. And the third part is MCP server, actually which server goes and connect to the databases or any external data sources and give sends the data back to LLM again. So that's how a server is responsible for communicating with your external sources. We have these three components in the MCP architecture, and with that, how do you build? So there is a whole GitHub repository like github.com/model context protocol. You go, there are different SDKs, Python SDKs, Golang, whatever language you like, Node.js, lot of industries, a lot of open source and MCP, or the you can find it in Node.js these days, or Docker or Python as well. And you can build your MCP using those SDKs. And what does that mean? You write an MCP server. It's not just one interface. It's a set of list of functions which is gets called tools. So you can call them MCP tools. And for example, if I want to write a MCP server for GitHub, there is an official one now, but previously there was not. So how community would have written it, or they have wrote it? There are different functions like or different tools like create repository, create pull request, get pull request. So think of it as an interface for doing a specific task. So you can use you can disable or enable any specific tool that you don't want to do, and you can go along. I can also share an example as well, like if I have to share
Sure,
my
please go ahead.
screen. So this is for Claude Desktop that I use. It's really good for MCP as well. So you can see, like, go here, I have different MCPs like GitHub, item, which runs some commands to my system, file system, Asana. We use Asana a lot as well. And then we have Atlassian. Like almost every company uses Atlassian for, like, you can integrate Jira, Confluence, and everything to those to your MCP. So for example, I can just say like, give me the open pull requests in the repository. Here I can give my repository. So this is my GitHub username, and this is one of the repository where. So it will. So the message went to the model. Model will analyze, and it will call the MCP server, and then MCP server will talk to GitHub, get all the data, and then it will send it back to the host or MCP. So here you can see, model will call this tool list pull request, and then I can allow. So this is a MCP tool from the GitHub, and then it will call the GitHub with these argument, and then you can see the response as well. So this tool will return all of those response, which gets sent back to the LLM again, and then LLM said like, okay, you have this one pull request open, and this is when it gets created. Which branch is it? What is the description? And then you can link. You can see the diff as well, and You don't need to go anywhere else, for example.
Sorry to interrupt. So you are saying that what you have done here is essentially you gave a command, it automatically connected it into MCP command, let us say MCP or whatever it is. The request went to MCP server. From there, it called the GitHub APIs, got a response, and then it sent it back to the model, and then model is displaying it in the prompt response area, right?
Yes, exactly. So you can see like this GitHub model, this GitHub MCP, it has multiple tools available, and it called the list pull request tool. So if you see
Okay.
there is somewhere called list pull request tool, then
Okay.
model is telling me from the context you mentioned about the pull request, and I
Mhm.
need to call the list pull request tool, and it
Okay, got it.
each tool accepts some arguments. It will also show that, and then you can allow it, you can always allow it, and you in Claude you can also see that these things. But Claude Desktop, think of it as a MCP client. My
Okay.
Claude Sonnet, the model I'm using, it is MCP host, or it's a
Okay.
LLM, and then my
Okay.
MCP server is GitHub. It's a, I think, paid offering or something. You can also use
Hmm.
free tools available in the market,
Sure.
which is something like Goose is one of the thing, very
Okay.
famous, built from my previous organization. It's a
Okay.
open source MCP tool
Goose. Okay.
client. You can connect with your Olama servers as well, and connect to Gemini or any other
Okay.
uh, LLM provider which support tools as well.
So to draw a parallel to, let's say, HTTP word, generally what used to happen is like, let's say, from Postman or such kind of app, we used to call the APIs, right? But here, what the one step extra is, instead of calling the GitHub APIs directly, you will give the request to MCP server, and server will call the GitHub APIs, get the data, and then it will send back to the client, which is in this case the Claude Desktop. So the MCP server is the one who is programmed to do all the communication and send it back to the client, right?
It's partially true, partially not,
Mm.
because when you're
Okay.
calling a API, it doesn't have the context. So, for example, you call the API, and after
Mm.
that you call if next API.
Mm.
It might be related to or not related to the previous API that you called. But
Right.
with MCP, right now, for example, you ask for a pull request, which we did.
Mm.
I
Right.
can just say like close this pull request. I don't need to
Right.
say it. So MCP
Mm.
already has that context that this is the PR,
Right.
this is the link we are talking
Right.
about. I need to
Mm.
close that. So that context helps you to improve and fast your
Right.
workflows.
Mm. Okay. And that context will sit with the client, or it will sit with the server where it is the requests are getting going.
That's a very important question, and context always gets. MCP servers can have their own memory where they can store context as well, but those contexts can be will be to LLM as well, because LLM
Okay.
keeps. You might have heard about context window of LLM,
Right.
and after
Mm.
that they started hallucinating or
Right.
start giving you wrong responses. Gemini or OpenAI 4. GPT 4.1, they can have up to 1 million token context window, so they can have store a lot of the information within themselves, while the other model can have 120k tokens, which is not less, but as compared to 1 million they are less.
So essentially, the LLM itself will have the context because it is the one who is serving the request. From past requests, it will know what is the context, and it will apply that context to the new request, just like a human agent. Okay.
Yeah.
And here, the LLM is sitting inside the MCP server, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And this can be anything, like you can use OpenAI, for example. OpenAI started supporting MCP recently.
Mm.
Claude is always they are always supporting MCP, and there is also Gemini 2.5 Pro
Okay.
or Flash, whatever you are using. They also support MCP tools. There are other, like you can find it Olama, a lot of open source model, they support tools. So this is the crucial thing you need to look for when you want to select the LLM for your MCP servers. They need to support tools. So for example, DeepSeek, it's very popular reasoning model, DeepSeek R1. Everyone wants to run
Mm.
like free
Mm.
locally on themselves, but they don't support tools. So someone in one of the community, they took that model, customized it, and they enabled tools. So you can use
Okay.
that version of DeepSeek R1 for MCP. So any model which support tools, you can use MCP with them.
Any model which supports tools, basically any model where MCP is supported, you mean to say it is ready to talk in that particular language of the protocol.
Yes, that is correct. And also, for example, in all the open source model, like similar to Docker file, there is now model file, and in the model file you can see like how that LLM is being configured. So for example, I want to build my own LLM. I can just pull llama 3 or llama 4 from olama,
Okay.
and then write my custom instructions, do
Okay.
some tweaking, increase the context window, for example, just
Okay.
jailbreak things here and there in the model file, and then I can create my own. So similarly, like it's good to, if you're using olama, it's good to check model file if they have
Okay.
tools in that model file or not. So but most of the I think LLMs, they use tools these days, or they support tools.
Sure, interesting. And another question that was coming to my mind is like, generally a lot of interaction is required. For example, in GitHub, right, you have to give user IDs and passwords, and then somehow session keys and all will also be maintained, right? So all these things, have they been coded into the MCP server itself, or that's what it must be, right? And all the inputs will be taken to the prompt window, right? Here in this case.
So in the previous example that we saw, like asking about open request from GitHub, it is still talking to GitHub, and how it will connect. So the prompts are different thing, but how the MCP server will authenticate against GitHub, it's traditional, or you can say like using API keys, or
Hmm.
for example GitHub tokens as well. That's one of the things that how MCP supports. You can create GitHub token, and it can be fine grained as well. You want to give certain access, or certain access to certain repository access, so you do that from the tokens. And in the configuration file, you can say like I want to npx or something, or however the GitHub MCP runs. You do that, pass the environment variable, like for GitHub they takes the environment variable as a token, and then you pass it, and your server can talk to your GitHub account.
The question that I was trying to ask is, let's say there is some service like GitHub, some other service, let's say, and you are talking it via the prompt, right? That connect to this and get some data. You also might end up sharing your passwords and all those things in the prompt window, right? And security can be. Do you think people should be mindful of that and probably wait for more security systems to come up before starting to share all these things, sensitive data?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I think this is where MCP lacks the security standards, and it will in future will move more matured frameworks. But and there is one thing, you also need to use trusted MCPs, because lot of open source MCPs, or any attackers, they can build their own MCP, but they can have malicious prompt or some malicious tools or script which can send you prompts or something to them. So we need to check always the source code, or be very cautious about which MCP
Right.
tool are we using. But general standards is like, if your MCP server, you are running it locally, you can build it. You can use standard IO for talking to that
Okay.
MCP server.
Okay.
But if you
Okay.
are using MCP server is on hosted remotely, for example, I use Asana MCP server, which is hosted remotely. It doesn't run
Mm.
locally. So they use SSE. So this is something like building that standard. You have to keep to make those models secure, and at the same time, it's our responsibility as well. How do we want to make sure those prompts are
Okay.
not exposing a lot of information? And interesting to watch what are the security standards gets come up with MCP in the future.
That's interesting. So, what are some real life scenarios where MCP protocol can be used? You mentioned GitHub. Where else can it be used?
So how I see MCP can helpful is how it can improve your workflow, or how it can do things for you, and for different roles. For example, for software engineers, you might just need VS Code and Copilot, and you can integrate, like for example, Jira, or like Atlassian and GitHub MCP with it, which can run like for example create pull requests or do something, and it can also update Jira tickets, put comments on your behalf directly from the terminal. This could be one workflow. For engineering managers, I do work on Jira, or like Atlassian products. I do have Asana. I do have another data sources, things like that. And a lot of information is distributed here, there, and it's somewhere. And this is where it is helpful for me to find that data sources, like where I can find different information. And then also for after a meeting, I just want to post my meeting notes into Google document or into a Confluence file page, so I can just directly say to my LLM, this is the transcript, create a meeting notes, and push publish to a Confluence. I don't need to do all of those
Okay, that
manual work. This is where it will help me. So I see MCP is like identifying where your work can be optimized, or so I will
okay.
see always see helping MCPs per role or which role
Mhm.
you are in, and you might need different MCPs for that.
Interesting. So basically, computers were doing automation, right? Software was doing automation. Now, MCP, what it is doing is you don't even need to implement any protocols and tools all the time. You just kind of connect your clients with some MCP server. And now the human language, the text, right? The spoken language can be used to get all the data and call all the APIs. The MCP servers will take care of translating the human language into the API language, basically, right? Kind of translating it into HTTP requests or SCP requests or whatever it is, and kind of all the operations will happen.
So those things are also happening at the model layer. So model is so for example the GitHub example that we saw. So model
Hmm. Hmm.
LLM provide LLM. They are actually converting like what are the things that MCP needs. This tool like it needs owner, it needs repository, it needs state, and then finding that context is it is very similar to like natural language processing or dialog flow which was used in in the past. It's a past thing from Google as well. Like I'm not sure they still use it or not, but
Yeah.
you find the context from the prompt. The language does that, understand your, and then it pass it to the LLM, or sorry, it pass it to the MCP tool, and MCP just dump directly. So think of it MCP as a protocol and those tools as a plugin to connect to your
Okay.
LLM. And LLM, because these days LLMs are very powerful, they can do a lot of things for you. They can
Hmm.
understand your sentiments, they can understand your emotions, and with context, they can do a lot of things. So, which is very crucial and very,
Okay.
which makes them very powerful over time. So,
Sure.
that's how this will work.
Okay, so basically, as what I understand is LLMs are pretty powerful because they have a lot of data themselves. Now their power is going to be exponentially increased because they have their own data, plus they can connect with data sources, other data sources, and already the large language models are capable of translating human language, kind of understanding it to an extent. Now using that human language understanding, they can also connect to the APIs and different protocols, get data, and do it both ways, right? They can both read and write data into different repositories and servers, and this will kind of augment the power of LLMs. And in the context of MCP, I think the another interesting thing is like, so so all the data they are getting, right? Let's say running GitHub, let's say PR and all that. I believe right now they're just using it, fetching it, and kind of displaying it, but not really storing it or analyzing it or utilizing it, right? But going forward, probably someone can also write models that whatever the data they are fetching, and probably that data also becomes part of the model, right? In a way, for good or bad reasons. And so those possibilities also exist, right? Because if the models can read the data on behalf of you, they can also read all by themselves, right? All these MCP servers, and someone can probably, let's say, I have a LLM, a model. I want to extend its capabilities with, let's say, different kind of data. I can connect to MCP servers and start pulling all the data from everywhere and extend the already existing knowledge base of the LLM, right? All those, I don't even have to do that programmatically now. I can do it via this prompts and all those things, right?
This is very dangerous territory or the
That's
trustworthy
why I was.
trajectory we are going on. Like it's always a case like whatever you're talking right now to your LLMs, LLM providers can use that data for the training. That's always there until unless you're not a high tier or pay on a paid plan. Everything that you're talking, it's being used. That data is always being used for training. One thing I think we all should always like. I'm very much fan of zero trust policy, and you can run these local LLM tools. Like I will say, like run it locally using Olama. Recently, Mistral they also released their tool, which is very powerful with their model, which is very powerful. They support MCP as well, and they can run on 32 gigs of RAM. So you don't need a powerful GPU as well, and they are built for software engineering as well. So I would say like these models are coming in, and the best way is to stay secure and run your own model on Olama or locally, so you know your LLMs are not making that data like just for training only without your consent or without your knowledge.
Interesting. So what I now is becoming a bit scary for me in the sense that MCPs have opened new windows for kind of getting connecting to the world, but at the same time, creators of the MCP, if they have malicious intent, it can also become one of those channels where a lot of secrets can be compromised, a lot of information can be compromised. So as Rajat rightly mentioned, before using an MCP server, you have to be very cautious that it is in a way it is regulated in a way, and it is coming from a trusted source, some sources whom you deeply trust, so that you know for sure that the data that you are giving to the MCP servers, right, they are just using it for that particular operation and not storing it, requests and the responses, and at least not storing it without your permission and without your knowledge. And probably it's also time to be a bit more conscious and kind of, as Rajat mentioned, have zero trust towards anything which is new. And if you really want to use MCPs, use it for those operations where sensitive data is not involved, probably to start with, before these things become more established in terms of security and all. And but of course it's fun, it is super useful. As Rajat just showed, you can just the request in human language and it will automatically translate it into correct APIs and fetch all the data and display it. But security should be on top of your mind is what I am understanding. So what are the alternatives to MCP? Like apart from MCP, is there any other way in which the models can communicate with the rest of the world?
Definitely. For example, if you look for MCP, is more sort of like an open source standard which gets now getting adopted by all the industries. Think of it like MCP, the new Android of the AI world, where all the companies started pulling in and then supporting Android building on their tools, things like that. But if you look more proprietary, you can find Open GPT, custom GPTs, or like you find GPT plugins and things like that. Those are, I would say, like they can talk to, for example, web or do certain things. There is a Canva GPT as well, which can talk to your Canva and do things on your behalf. For example, create different graphics for you. So that's another thing. Langchain is one of the thing which is very popular, or which was also very popular before MCP came. Langchain is a Python, based on Python. It's very useful as well for you can build your own custom things like on Langchain, like connect with your database sources and things like that, which I did a lot. In the past as well, like, and but the thing is, there is you need to write prompts which are more strict. Like, I only want the SQL query. Sometimes models can give you wrong responses. You need to have data sanitization in place with validation at the same time, and then you can run those output of LLMs into your data source and then give the response back. So that's another thing you can do.
Interesting. Okay, so there are a lot of proprietary alternatives already to MCP. MCP is the open source one, so anybody can use, and kind of it will be just like all the open source. It is also becoming very popular.
Langchain is also open source. Just want to clarify that as well. It's you don't
Sure.
need to have any subscription for Langchain.
So someone, let's say, wants to implement his own MCP server or the MCP protocol, right? What are some of the common points that should be kept in mind?
First, you're trying to build your own MCP server. You have to choose which language you are most comfortable for.
Okay.
Like, and there are different SDKs available in the market. You
Mm.
can not in the market. You can say like github.com/model context protocol. You can find different SDKs which are supported there. It is Python or Golang or Node or any these things. Pick your own SDK and then follow the frameworks. Couple
Okay.
of things that we have to be cautious about, like how are we talking to external data sources. For example, if
Mm.
our MCP is talking to our database, then we need to make sure that we are using MTLS or SSL encryption while talking to our database as well. And at the same time, how are we doing data sanitization, not to storing any secrets or anything into our prompts. If do we need any memory and things like so, building those fail safe as well, those so that your MCP cannot be exploited at the
Mhm.
same time. And also, how do you send your data back to your model? So for example, like as I mentioned, if your MCP server is local, make sure you talk it via standard IO. If you like MCP, then SSE or HTTP, you can do that.
Interesting. I think basically all the security protocols should be kept in mind if you're implementing your own MCPs, so that whatever data you are sharing with different servers remains safe. And of course, you have to be good with languages programming, of course, because it's an implementation task essentially, right? And and there are many options to choose from. As Rajat mentioned, there are SDKs available already in Python, Node.js, and all those things. That reminds me of a good parallel with when there was Google search, right? And there was also
Yeah.
this Google search for enterprises. I'm not sure if you're aware, where you could just kind of all the enterprise data that is present right within an enterprise, you can enable Google search for that particular enterprise only. So it will kind of index all the data of the enterprises, and you can search and get all the files and PDFs and videos whichever are present in the particular intra site, basically, right? And something like that was there. Now I think this MCP, right? So let's say some big organization kind of which has multiple repositories and data, and they write some MCP servers and all those things, and kind of open a portal, just like you were showing, right? The cloud for desktop, and entire organization's data can be up for speculation and search, right? And anybody can access any data in that particular enterprise, assuming it's access. There are restrictions and controls and all those things, and that can also be one great use case, right? Because now there are too many ways in which you can access data, and it can be exhausting, right? You have to PDF files everywhere, but with MCPs, right, it can simply connect with all the repositories of an enterprise, even the repositories like GitHub and all, and everything will be accessible at fingertips, right? That's what I believe one of the
Yeah,
implementation and use cases can be, right?
this is true, but the one that you are talking about, it's a different concept. It's called RAG. I forgot the full uh,
I think retrieval augmented something generation.
retrieval augmented generation or something. And there are a lot of companies who are making millions just by doing that. Like Glean
Okay.
is one of the things that I can remember. It's a powerful tool. It can connect to all the different data sources, your Google Workspace, your
Okay.
Atlassian Workspace, and all the data sources, and it index all of that data. And this is where I think differs from MCP client, and like MCP servers. MCP servers, they can have memory, they can index things, but RAG, they are centralized indexed information. And MCP are like think of it like a nerve. But RAG is kind of a brain who has that all of
Okay.
these info. It can be retrieved much faster. And if anyone is interested, they can build their own RAG using Langchain. So Langchain is that framework that you can build your custom RAG, or if you are thinking of
Okay.
going enterprise or for a backup, you can always check out tools like Glean in the market, which already does that for you.
Interesting. So RAG in conjunction with LLMs can be a great tool to kind of put all your data into one brain, as you mentioned. Then they will all be accessible for different use cases and searching and all those things. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and it will help you find a lot of historical data as well, like you might not know, and it's good for finding context or building on the old thing. So, and
Okay.
also finding information. But there is also security hole that you can think about permission. So, for example, if I connect my application to Google Workspace, in Google Workspace, for example, Google Doc, we can set certain policies to whom we want to share with. But at the same
Right.
time, if the RAG ingested the document, index the document, and we also have to make sure that is it can be fetched given to the right stakeholder or
All
right.
the permissions will need to be replicated in the MCP server also, right? So that it doesn't kind of become a leak there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that would be a
and
big
also
challenge. Okay.
yeah, and those RAGs also need to be built some sort of authentication in place so that they can identify which user is asking those data, and then you can replicate those policies. So yeah, so there is a huge challenge. I have heard a lot of scary stories of that.
Okay.
Secret data.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. What is exciting about all this is that with LLMs and MCP, right? Many options have opened up, right, which are not there earlier, and many use cases have opened up which were difficult to kind of imagine, let's say 5 years back, and combined with the power of the LLMs, where the human language can be interpreted to such an extent, right? It can be augmenting a lot of things, but at the same time, the security is becoming a nightmare in all these things because you are accessing data, and the data policies which are present at the data store level also need to be present at the MCP server level or at the client level, and those things will be the challenge. And I believe industries and enterprises working on these tools must be cautious of that already. They must be doing something around it, and hopefully it will all be contained end. So, Rajat, great conversation. I think all the viewers who are watching this must have learned both the fun part of the MCPs as well as the complications involved here, and all the, as you mentioned, right, there are some sensitive parts to it where if you are implementing MCP or if you're using MCP, probably you should be very, very careful. And I would, at this point, I would also like to ask all the viewers if they have tried to implement their own MCP servers, what was their experience? Or if they have tried to use it, what are the use cases that they had tried to solve and if they found it useful? Thanks, Rajat. Thanks for joining and kind of giving all this, sharing all this knowledge with us. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you, and it was nice having conversation with you, and thanks for having me, Pradeep.
So all of you guys can follow Rajat on Medium also. I will put a link in the description. And do subscribe to Better Engineering and Management podcast for many such amazing discussions lined up. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.